Ciao.
Now we come to the highlight of whatever is going on in this show. First of all, this is a matter.
Hitting record.
Yeah, just for safety's sake.
That's very kind of you, Mike Rose. Mike Rose is with us, everybody. Mike Rose spending the week doing this thing. Let me tell people really quickly, by the way, I apologize. I know I had no idea how hit or miss this show had become over the past few months, because it feels like I'm doing all kinds of stuff all the time, which I guess I am, but sometimes it's different stuff, I suppose. So the next 3 weeks of guests are laid out. I'm talking to somebody next Friday. I'm talking to somebody the Sunday after that. So I know we're good. I'm honestly, you and I were talking about a podcaster, Mike, before we started, who is who's actually hiring for their podcasts.
Crazy pants.
I'm thinking about finding a producer. I'm thinking about trying to find a producer. Part-time for a couple of shows, because macOS Ken stays macOS Ken. There's no, what's a producer going to do? Say, go do the news, I kind of already do, right? Exactly.
Do it now.
Do it now. Exactly. Do it now is what you're waiting for. Yeah. Maybe though somebody to do scheduling and things like that, because even when I was the producer of a TV show, scheduling was my downfall. Finding guests was my downfall. I can write copy. I can, come up with the words and things. And scheduling somebody to be on is my kryptonite. Anyway,
I had this. I mean, I never was responsible for booking a TV show, but I did have the experience of trying to book a comedy show in the 1990s, and the show I produced was called The Occasional because I could not get my act together enough to do it every other week. Like it is so hard, and it's so interesting that you can build a stable of people who are always going to be available, but then you're trying to create variety. And especially when it's stand-up comedy, like your people are bringing their friends, they're bringing their families, they're bringing anybody they can grab. And at some point, like, you've seen this person's act. Like, there's not going to be new, unless you keep rotating in new people, you're not going to get new experiences. One time, this is a tangent, but one time when I was doing my stand-up career, I was out of town on a Saturday, and my then girlfriend, now wife, decided, well, I always go to Don't Tell Mamas on Saturday night. I'm just going to do that anyway and go to the show, even though Mike is not in it. Mm-hmm. And she ended up being, I think, one of two people in the audience. And the comics were so frustrated with the fact that there was nobody there. They ended up doing one another's sets. They did one another's acts because they knew them so well. And she said, this was the funniest thing I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I was so mad that I missed it because, like, at some point you have to acknowledge the absurdity of it. It's like, why are we doing this show for two people? Right. We're just going to do it for ourselves. So that's what they did.
All right. So I may have told this story here before, and if I have, I apologize. And this was a long, long, long time ago. Yes. This was like the 90s, the late 90s, mid 90s, maybe even. But I used to go to this comedy club that was upstairs from a Chinese place in Boston, actually in Cambridge, right outside of Harvard Square. And normally it was open mic, and there were like three guys who were always there. Eugene Merman from Bob's Burgers was actually one of them at the time, just, struggling comedy dude like everybody else. And one night they were like, yeah, we have a special guest tonight, and the cover is like $2 more than it normally is, because I think it was usually $3 to get it, and they were asking for $5. We didn't have it. It was fine. But Louis C.K. was there. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know who Louis C.K. was. Nobody knew who he wrote. And I think he had maybe been on Letterman. So you kind of knew who he was, but it wasn't the thing, right?
Yeah.
So we went on Friday night, and he was supposed to be there Friday night and Saturday night, and he had gotten a fight with a club owner in Boston because he was supposed to be playing a place that seated between 500 and 1,000. Mm-hmm. And he was supposed to be getting real money, but they got in a little tussle or whatever. So there were maybe 15 of us seeing him. Wow. And it was amazing. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen, ever. And my friends and I, who only ever went on Friday, were like, right, we're going back tomorrow night. And the thing is, word of mouth had gotten around, so the place was filled. Maybe 30 people the following night. Mm-hmm. Maybe 40. I don't know. And he was good, but he was stumbling a bit. And, but it was kind of interesting. And then he like 25 minutes into a set, he was like, listen, I'm really sorry, by the way. I know I seem a little bit off, but those guys were here last night.
He's pointing to you.
Yes, pointing to our table, and he's like, and I'm trying to, because I'm trying to do stuff that they haven't heard yet. And of course, we talked to him afterwards, and we're like, we came back
to see the same
because
act.
we were amazed. Yeah. So, but thanks, and so it was almost like getting a private show twice. Oh, probably not a thing you should say about Louis C.K. Now that I think about it.
No, that's a little no.
Yeah.
I think so. When I was a similar time period when I was doing this before my children were born, and Jim Gaffigan came out of the same comedy training program that I did. So he's like the most famous alum, and he was already starting to get some attention. Yeah, that he had I think he was basically a year ahead of me. But one night I was doing a show at Stand Up New York, and it was a regular show. It wasn't like a bringer show or anything. So it was a regular show. Mm-hmm. And the host, the MC for that show, was a young guy, crazy hair, skinny, and clearly strung out. Like he was he was nice enough, but he was definitely on cocaine. And it was Zach Galifianakis.
Really?
Yeah. And so like a couple years later, or quite a few years later, I was like, wait a second, this guy in The Hangover, I remember him. He was kind of funny. He was great. I mean, he was like wired. And it's a very different style than what he does. Like he's known sort of for being sort of laconic and not hyper in that same way. Not Bobcat Goldthwait, right. High energy. But yeah, that's one. That's just one.
I have Bobcat Goldthwait stories I'll tell you, but I know I've told them here before, so I'm not going to do it right now because we actually have to get to. Gee whiz, dude, we're like 7 minutes in to a 12-minute show.
That's how this goes sometimes. It's going to be quick. Well, it's funny because today it's news to me, yes. Right? That's what we're talking about. So conveniently enough, what is news to me, and it's, as we record this, Jackie Mason, legendary comedian Jackie Mason, has passed away at the age of 93. Yeah. And so he was 93. He began his career as a ordained rabbi. He was the son, grandson, great-grandson, great-great-grandson, nephew, brother of rabbis. I think 2 or 3 of his sisters married rabbis. This was the family business. Right. And he did go to seminary. He was ordained. He went to Yeshiva University, and he had a congregation in Latrobe, Pennsylvania for a while. By the way, he was born in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Yeah, okay. So he was born funny.
I was reading about him. So he was born in Wisconsin, and he had congregations in Pennsylvania and North Carolina.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Because that makes sense.
And you can only imagine what those people, years later, those people were like, oh my God, Jackie Mason was the rabbi. Who knew? Nobody knew Jackie Mason was the rabbi. Was he funny? He was funny. He's okay. His sermons were not all that, but he was, right. Something. There was a little spark. But I remember, obviously his career, legendary career, he didn't even start in comedy until after his father passed away for fear of disappointing his father, the rabbi. But I didn't realize that he was blacklisted from TV for quite some time after an unfortunate incident on the Ed Sullivan Show, where the show was live, but it was preempted midway through by a speech by President Lyndon Johnson. And Jackie Mason was performing when the network came back to the show. Ed Sullivan was giving him a heads up that he was running out of time, so he held up 2 fingers for 2 minutes and then 1 finger for 1 minute. And Mason started saying, I'm getting a lot of fingers. Here's a finger for you, and a finger for you, and a finger for you. And it was interpreted by Sullivan that that the bird was being flipped in his direction. Mason was fired. He didn't get paid. There was a lawsuit, and he couldn't go on television for a long time.
That's crazy. Although it kind of makes sense, because when Jackie Mason, The World According to Me hit, I want to say Showtime or HBO, I can't remember which.
It was HBO, yeah.
When we were teenagers.
Yes.
I want to say. it was sort of like it was heralded as a comeback in a way, or at least that's how it plays in my memory. And I know I was not conscious, and I was a comedy guy. I mean, I didn't do comedy, but I was a comedy guy, and I had no idea who Jackie Mason was until that hit. And then
I mean, he was
after.
I didn't know who he was either, and when his show came to Broadway, I went to see it with my grandparents. And and my grandfather, my father's father, Frank Rose, was a funny guy. He was theatrical. He was funny. He was known within the family for being very funny and always with a joke. And he produced plays and musicals, and he did a lot of different stuff. But he was like, I'd never seen him laugh so hard at somebody else's joke as we were seeing Jackie Mason. And I remember so clearly Mason delivering a line about, he said, here's the thing. Every Jewish man has a building that he could have bought 20 years ago for $15. And he would have, too, if it weren't for those bastards. And I swear, my grandfather fell out of his chair. He was laughing so hard. It's like, and I also saw my father in that. It's like, oh yeah, I've heard some of this, like, if it weren't for those people, this would have been successful. With my dad, it was like a pizza business that was like hot dog carts. So it was pizza on a la carte. That was his big entrepreneurial thing that did not take off. But it's like, if not for those bastards, the pizza thing. And it was so interesting to see this brand of comedy, this brand of performance, this sort of Borscht Belt reborn that was so familiar and so sort of intimately connected to my grandparents' generation that I was tangentially aware of, but never had experienced the laboratory grade, felony weight Borscht Belt. Right. And it was amazing. And Mason, to his credit, he didn't change. He kept his shtick and sort of waited for the audience to come back around to him, which was, it can't have been easy. But yes, he has left us at the age of 93 after a long and legendary career in showbiz.
I was reading one of the obituaries about him.
Yeah.
And it said he had passed away. He was 93 years old. They haven't released a cause of death. And you can practically hear Jackie Mason going, he was 93.
What do you need? What do you need?
What's the cause of death? Well, he died at 93 years old. So I'm guessing it was 92 years.
He went to the Olympics to try out for the skateboarding. And, one thing led to another. No, he was 93 years old.